This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and this episode is brought to you by Silna Health. That's S-I-L-N-A. The premium front-end RCM company that leverages technology with a team of onshore insurance experts to handle benefit checks, eligibility checks, and prior authorizations. Finally, a vendor that you can trust, like a full-time employee that scales with your business. Just mention the Profiles in Leadership podcast to receive a free trial. Today, our guest is Joe Davis. Joe served as managing director and senior partner at BCG, which stands for Boston Consulting Group. In The Generous Leader, his book, Joe shares a performance review. The review goes, he was told he was not the best at problem solving solo, but with others, he could solve any challenge. His manager identified his key strength, which is a person who could connect. Joe has spent 37 years with BCG, co-founded the Washington, D.C. office, led office systems, started BCG's North American public sector business, and led BCG's North America, founded and also chaired BCG's Center for Inclusion and Equity. Joe earned his BA from Whitman College, his MBA from Harvard Business School, and Joe is currently serving his second term as Whitman's board chair. Joe has been married to Sarah for over 40 years, has 4 children and 8 grandchildren. So, Joe, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on today.
Thank you, Steve. 8 and number 9 on the way.
Oh, congratulations. I have one, which is absolutely fantastic. So I can't wait for the next 7. So we'll see.
Well, that's great.
Give us a little context just to start off here. Just tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you got into this line of work.
Well, okay. I know you're in the Seattle area or the Northwest area, and I grew up born in San Francisco, grew up in Seattle. Actually,
Yeah.
it's funny. I was thinking about my first job. I used to put toothpicks in cinnamon and soak them, and then I'd go sell them to kids at school for a dime each. That was a
Oh,
lot of
wow.
profit, That was like in fourth grade. A lot of profit.
Entrepreneur in the
I know.
making
I
for
think
sure.
back. And I had a
Yeah.
paper out for 6 years. As you said, I went to Whitman College, started off at Procter and Gamble in sales, which was a reasonably humbling experience, going from college where they make you think whatever they make you think, and then I'm going to the back room of grocery stores selling shampoo and toothpaste. It was
Yeah.
an
Wow.
exceptional experience, though, for, as you might imagine, a lot of reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had never thought about being a consultant, quote unquote, but went to HBS, our business school, as you noted, and it's called Black Saturday. There's a day where all the big consulting firms, investment banks, all come and interview anyone who's interested. All day Saturday. It's very wild. You get
Yeah.
callbacks on Sunday, and you get an offer on Sunday night. So on Monday, no one talked about it because you didn't know if the person next to you got a job or didn't get a job. That was for a
Oh,
summer job.
yeah.
Hey, got myself in BCG, and there I was for nearly 40
Yeah.
years, 37 years. Loved it.
That's great. You're also the board chair at Whitman College, Whitman University in Walla Walla, Washington, which, for those who don't know, is an excellent academic school and right in the heart of wine country. And it's a beautiful, beautiful little town that's changed a lot in the last 40 years.
Absolutely. And my mom grew up in Waitsburg, Washington. They were wheat farmers, so it was
Yeah.
some version of home to me. It has changed massively. Yeah. Do you have any Walla Walla wines on
Oh,
behind you?
absolutely. I got a
Hey,
whole rack over here with Walla Walla wines. We love to go there because, as I said, it used to be definitely kind of a farm town with, one street in the middle and a couple good restaurants and a lot of wheat farmers around. But now it's turned into this kind of chic wine country, kind of cool place, like a mini Sonoma almost. So.
Yep, it's
Yeah.
a great town. And thank you for
Yeah.
the plug for the school. It's a great school.
Yeah, it's a great school, and I went to Pacific Lutheran University, so
Okay, similar.
played on the basketball team, and so we always played Whitman when we went to Walla Walla, of course. So they were in our conference, so I know the school pretty well. So when you were with BCG, I mean, you oversaw teams ranging from 3 people to 7,000 people. So I mean, you definitely have managed small and large groups in your career.
Absolutely. Well, of course, the threes were when I was managing teams serving clients, which is one set of management skills, you might say. And then when I up to 7,000 is leading North America, which is a whole different deal,
Yeah,
motivating young hotshots to work their rear off when they just want to get promoted is reasonably easy. Managing 7,000 people of all types, when you're leading through, in particular through COVID, was well, I'd say it was a lot of fun, but it's quite tricky.
yeah. So you gave a TEDx talk, and in that you talked about, I think the title of it was "Leadership is about Generosity." So tell us a little bit about why you chose that to focus on, and what do you mean by generosity when you talk about leadership?
Yeah, and I think that's the question. What do I mean? Because that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people the minute you hear that word. And what I mean by being a generous leader or leading with generosity, I really define that as a leader who gives of themselves freely without expectation of direct personal benefit so others can develop, grow, and thrive at their full potential. And let me just make 2 points on that. One,
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's all about being nice. You do have to deliver results, absolutely. But what I do believe is if you're actually getting everyone to thrive, quote unquote, at their full potential, you're probably delivering pretty dang good results as a leader of your team, your organization, or whatever it might be. So that's what it's really about, is ensuring your teams fire at their best so that, you know, so that the
yeah.
organization, the team, whatever, fires at its best.
Yeah. And recently you have become an author now. You've written a book. I'm just going to hold up for those on video here,
Thank you.
The Generous Leader. And the subtitle is Seven Ways to Give Yourself for Everyone's Gain. So tell me about why write the book, and was that fun or was that a grind?
Have you written a book yet before I
Uh,
answer?
I have not written a book.
Okay,
That's why I'm
well,
always curious of authors. I'm always, what's it like? So
it's a grind. Let me
yeah,
say that. However, if it gets to where you just held it up, it's fun. You know, it's um, it's actually quite an experience. You have to have the time and the wherewithal and the patience. There were many times where my wife would say, "Hey, would you come to dinner with us right now? Come out." I'd say, "Sarah, if I don't type, nothing happens. It's not like me leading North America and I can give 1,000 orders and everything just kind of happens. I
Yeah,
wrote the book, but I had a
yeah,
coach. When you said what's it all about, it was interesting because when I finished the head of BCG North America, some friends said you should write about leadership. I actually wrote pretty quickly a book about the COVID time. And I shared it with a publisher and they would, no book. I said, what do you mean? They said, by the time we get it out, it takes 2 years for them to get a book out. No one would be interested, or want to read about COVID. So I just expanded it to more of my life and then interviewed a bunch of other executives for
yeah,
the interview. It
yeah.
is
Well,
also, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just said it's a great book. I mean, I love the stories that you tell, and to
Thank
me, because I consider myself a storyteller, so when they're real people with real lives and real stories, it just seems to click better, and you remember it better, and I don't know, at least to me, it just seems to mean more, and so you have a lot of personal stories with real names and real people in it, which is great.
Oh yeah, no, nobody hid. I mean, publishers are very
Yeah,
funny. I had to make sure everybody signed a release for me to put their name in there, but they did.
yeah,
They did.
I'll bet.
And it's actually, go ahead. I'm sorry, you go.
I just said, and including your administrative assistant that's been with you a long time, that she's also highlighted in there, and I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was interesting because she said, "Well, Joe, you were an example of someone who actually had faith in me at the very beginning and put me in positions to grow and develop." I said, "What do you mean?" I didn't even think about it. So, like, 2 weeks in, you were on a call with a bunch of people, and you said, "Aren't you coming in the room?" And she said, "Well, I don't belong in there." I said, "Well, yeah, you belong everywhere I am. I mean, I need you to know what's going on in my world if you're going to actually help me make a
Yeah,
difference in my world." And she was 22 or 21 at the
yeah,
time. She was blown
yeah,
away, but
yeah.
no, that's
That is
all.
so awesome.
Giving them opportunities.
Absolutely. And then how did you get, come on, Adam Grant to endorse the book and have a little tag on the front cover? That's impressive.
Look at you. You're really, yeah, well, because of BCG, I knew Adam. I had him come and talk to, actually, when I ran the West Coast, he came out and talked to my group. And then during COVID, he came on, obviously by Zoom a few times. And he teaches at a business school where a lot of BCGers come from. So there was a relationship developed. I'll tell you a little bit interesting on that because I think a lot of people, when they do his endorsements, if they know you, they kind of skim it and then they'll write some up.
Yeah.
Adam said, no, no, Joe, I read every book if I'm going to endorse it. And I thought
Yeah.
to myself, holy crap, then I'll never get an endorsement because and it was funny because like, the publisher gave me a drop dead date. And I kept sending him a note, hey, oh yeah, yeah, don't worry, don't worry. And there's like 2 days left. I said, Adam, I got 2 days, and I thought, why not be pushy? And he said, okay, I'll read it tonight. And then he wrote something for me. It was very, very kind of him. Very kind of him.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's a really interesting book. I enjoyed it because again, it's, I read a lot of books, for people I interview and whatever. I've read a lot of leadership books over my time. And, there's always that piece in there about results and performance and all that kind of stuff, which we know is very important. But this book, I kind of felt like you were channeling me because everything I read, I go, yeah, exactly. I agree. I mean, it was just like, so you really focus on, the care and compassion in leadership and, honesty and transparency in your communication. And of course, most people bring those things up, but they don't focus on it as strongly, I think, as you did.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. First off, I just said it, but you have to get results. It's not just about being nice. Joaquin Duato, the CEO of Johnson Johnson, said to me,
Yeah.
it's one of the stories. He said, Joe, the thing is, of course, a leader has to deliver results, but the sooner they can get past themselves and unlock all the great capabilities and traits of the people that are part of their team, the sooner they're going to get to those great results. And I thought that epitomized a lot of what I believed. There it does say in the forward there. I mean, of course, you have to have strategy and vision, all that stuff, and you have to be able to execute and put metrics in place and ways to monitor. You have to have that, but you also, if you're going to really move and inspire and motivate people, have to, lead them, motivate, make them really feel like they're part of the team and connected. And a lot of people write about creating strategies. I mean, there's classes in business school about it. So I thought I will center on this part. I do say in the forward, if you're not interested in this part, or if you have no idea on the other two parts, maybe learn the basics of management first, then move. Oh, I don't know what order you do, but
Yeah.
if you're not interested, this is not a book for you. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
glad. Although I've
Well,
had more people say it resonates with them, like you just said.
yeah, it's a great book, and you talk about how you need to lead with your heart. Now, that seems like a simple statement, but yet, you can take that a lot of different ways. So, explain that in your mind what it means to lead with your heart.
Yeah, well, what I think when I say that, what I really I'm thinking is that, as I said, a minute ago, you're really thinking about, okay, if Steve and I work together, and you worked for me, how do I ensure Steve is firing at his highest potential? And so I have to care a little bit about you to get you there. If I just don't care at all, you're just a cog in the wheel. Or if you don't think I care one bit, you're not going to be motivated. And
Yeah.
I just, I think, well, I can go into it, I think a couple of things that I think are critical to the heart, which you may not think, is being someone who really asks questions over and listens and understands, what does that person know that I don't know, that makes for a better outcome or better direction. And that's a action, but it's actually an action from the heart, especially if you listen out of respect and saying, okay, what do they know that I need to know, as opposed
Yeah.
just pretending you're asking questions to keep them, pretend you're interested.
Yeah. And the other part that I thought was interesting too, and I don't know if you anticipated this when you wrote the book, but you basically said that a generous leader must be committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what we've heard just recently is, oh, that's under fire. That's we took that too far. Don't pay attention to that. Whatever. I'd be interested to see, if I'm not putting you on the spot too much, what you think about that and what that means to you to take that DEI stuff into serious consideration.
Okay, yeah. You're not putting me on the spot, but it's interesting times. But I will, as you could tell if you read that book, I will tell you what I think. Let me start by saying one thing. I was interviewed by a person in Australia once, And he was not interested in DNI stuff. And he said to me, so, well, what do you, all you woke people, that's what he said to me, all you
Yeah.
want is equal outcomes. And I said, whoa, 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 buddy, what are you talking about? Well, I said, no, my friend, I want people to have a chance. Now, if they don't walk through, if they get a chance to walk through the door and can't deliver, then they won't keep the job, they get fired, whatever happens. I'm not saying that. I'm saying equal opportunity or chance to walk through that door and perform. That's what it's about. It was very interesting to me because that explained a little bit of why we got all this. Someone just thinks, oh, same for everybody. Well, no, that's not what anyone's arguing, I don't believe. Now,
Yeah.
more practically, just look at the population of the United States of America. If you're a business person or anybody who's going to be driving something with people, you're going to have a diverse set of people. That's just no two ways about it. And also, as you probably know, investment banks and consulting firms, including BCG and Bain and McKinsey, have all done studies that show the better results that have come from diverse leadership teams and diverse teams.
Yeah.
So now, the thing that's important here is it's not, I mean, we can debate, we can debate history and all that. And, should you give somebody a little extra leg up because they have a disadvantage? Obviously, I believe that, but some don't tend to believe that. But you don't even have to debate that to say, okay, how am I going to bring in a diverse team and ensure they can feel like they belong and fire on all cylinders? That's just, well, I guess I know that's undeniable. I think that's
Yeah.
undeniable. We can argue about how you get the
Sure.
team there, but that's so therefore, but I actually, you're right. I brought a chapter on just the importance as a leader. I call it a generous ally, really being an action ally and making sure, but that you can just translate that to a mentor if you want, making sure
Yeah.
they've got a shot.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes things get, people focus on the wrong things. I mean, I think we can all agree that a diverse opinion in today's world is definitely something that we need. That doesn't mean that you're giving somebody a job just because of this or that, and that's all that matters. I mean, research shows that, as you just mentioned, that diverse opinions, no matter what the background is, makes for a stronger collaboration and a stronger team going forward.
Yes, I mean, you started with, I think we can all agree. I'm not sure everybody does agree, but,
Yeah.
but that we should have all the opinions. Yeah, I'm going to, since we're on this topic, take a little bit of a risky statement because I think
Okay.
it's not just diverse opinion, but you have to have the grace to try to at least listen to where somebody else is coming from and understand it. You can dead not agree with it. That could be fine, but give the grace of, well, why you think that? Why do you think that? What's in your head that I'm missing? And that's what's really broken now. I remember once I was just reading an article about the Arizona state legislature was going to discuss abortion. I know I'm picking a big word there, but this was just something I read.
Yeah.
And one of the Republican legislators said, now, everybody, I'm going to state my opinion here, but you at least have to give me the grace to understand. I just think abortion, I mean, I think he used the word murder, is just wrong. So, we can argue over we do it or not, but at least understand, don't be like scream at me that I'm an idiot because I actually believe that. So now
Yeah.
give me the grace of going with, well, if you believe that, wow, now how are we going to think about this? But it was interesting
Yeah.
to me that he asked for the grace because he expected to be roasted.
Yeah. And I think what you said there is just so true. It just really infuriates me that I hate labels and I hate when people try and tell you what you think. So what you said, I hear this all the time, like, oh, well, if you believe this, then you believe that. And no, you can't say that. If I believe this, and I can believe something different over here, it doesn't always have to be the same. And I think that's what, unfortunately, people are trying to put us in boxes these days where, you're either this or that. And I've said this on this program many times before, but I gave a national speech once at an association meeting where the title of it was "I Believe in the Gray." Don't make it black and white. Don't put me in this box or that box because I may think this way on one thing and I may think this way on another thing. And if it looks gray to you, that's okay because I believe in the gray.
Yeah, that's what we're just saying here a little bit is whether it's a leadership trait or a humanity trait is asking questions and understanding where they're coming from. To your point, you may say, "Oh, you
Yeah.
believe this." Well, now does that mean you believe that? As opposed to it
Yeah.
does mean. Well, no, no,
Right.
no, no, I don't. Oh, that's interesting. Well, why do you believe that and not that? Now you have a valuable conversation started. But
Yeah.
you have to not just put them in a box. I
Yeah.
totally agree with you,
100,
Steve.
100%. So tell us a little bit about, you talk about it in the book, and I thought it was a great story too, where you had a mentor whose name was also Steve at at BCG. So tell us about Steve and what was he to you, and what did you learn from him?
Yeah, well, Steve was my mentor, I think 20 plus years. Just a few thoughts for all of us, but you don't just get assigned a mentor. You kind of develop a relationship. Either you find, wow, I like working with that person, and they're really trying to develop and grow me, or as a leader, I really like this person. I want to try to develop them, grow them. With that comes effort on both sides, right? Steve was exceptional at he just really wanted, well, he wanted to get to the best outcome. He's really an outcome driven guy. And he wanted every person on the team to perform at their highest to make sure you got there. So he was tough. I'll say he was tough, but it was all about you being better. So the feedback was always clear. It was in the moment. He cared deeply. I mean, if I may, you mentioned it, but there was a story at the beginning there about where I really learned the concept of having one's back and generous leader. Steve and I were going to open the Washington, D.C. office. I already moved my family down because I had to get my children in school. He didn't have children at the time. And we were flying to a client, and he said, "Oh, Joe, I got to tell you something. I got an offer to be the president of a company." And my brain thought, well, I said to him, "Oh, wow, really great." My brain thought, "Holy blank, I just
Yeah.
moved my family. What the hell is going to happen now?" Tell my wife. And he said, "Well, there's many puts and takes, but I couldn't do that to you and Sarah. You've decided to move. You moved for me. We're going to do this or with me. And so I'm going to stick and grow this thing." Now, 25 years later, I told him that story. I said, "Well, Joe, there were many puts and takes." I said, "I know, Steve, but were very clear with me that you cared about Sarah and me, and that meant a lot to me. And that's the power. That was a generous leader, someone who has your back, and someone who's one hell of a mentor. One to stick with me and help me grow."
Yeah,
And
it's
he's
so
also,
and so
go ahead.
impressive how people, say things to mentees or people that look up to them or whatever, and at the time they may not think it's that significant, or they may not think it's that big a deal, but it really resonated with that person, and they hear the story, like you said, 20 or 25 years later, and they're kind of like, oh, well, whatever. So it's just a good reminder as leaders that you have a lot of influence and a lot of, I don't know if power is the right word, but impact on people. And so what you say makes a difference. And so, don't take it lightly. The things you say, can be very impactful for people.
Yeah, people ask me, what do you think about all your years at BCG, and what's your proudest moments and all that. And really, I'm getting into the word legacy, and some 30-year-olds may not know what I'm talking about, but you and I would know. But I
Yeah.
look back, and it's just what you said, Steve. I had one fellow worked for me 4 or 5 years in the Washington office, and that left, and then 15 years later sent me a note saying, "Hey, I just made CEO. And I want to tell you, you said, I don't know, you said such and such to me, when I was just getting going, and that changed my whole trajectory." I have no idea what I said. I don't remember the conversation, but
Yeah.
and I said, "No, no, no, come on. You're a great guy. You had to earn that." He said, "Yeah, I know, but
Yeah.
this was a very meaningful conversation." So you're right. And then I think, though, to your point, there's a price for that, or there's a responsibility. I mean, you have to actually, I think, one, be thinking about who is the person, where are they coming from, what do they need to do to be
Mhm.
great, what do they have that they can use, and don't be afraid to call it straight with them.
Yeah.
With all that, if you don't call it straight, I mean, give them a bunch of mush thoughts. Well, one thing, they'll never remember you, and you won't be making a
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah, for sure. There's another part in the book that I'm just going to read it because I want to get it all here. So I just like to hear your response to this. So you said, if we follow the conventional wisdom of the past and leave the personal connections at home, we end up trying to lead at work with work, which is data, numbers, and so on. And then we wind up in one-dimensional relationships with
Yeah.
all the three-dimensional human beings in our organization. So I love that statement. So just expand on that a little bit. People aren't motivated by sheets and spreadsheets and data and numbers.
No, I mean, those are important. Neither you nor I are saying that, but we're talking about motivating people. Well, it's interesting. Somewhere I also say, the days of no offense, but Jack Welch, Neutron Jack, fire the bottom 10%,
Yeah.
that's just not going to cut it anymore. Or, and IBM's a hell of a company and has transitioned very swiftly. Or blues, you remember white shirt, blue suit, everyone's just a cog in the wheel.
Yeah.
That's just not the world we live in. And quite frankly, technology began the change and blur and all this. I mean, once the BlackBerry came out, you could be on 24/7. So there was no, it wasn't possible to go to work for 8 hours and then go home because you might get an email or whatever it was back then, a BlackBerry note from your boss asking you something. That accelerated with all the technologies and will only grow. And then I think so now all of a sudden the work life is blurred. So the human side does matter more. And then when you add to social media, there's all the data shows social media growth, anxiety growth. I don't care what age you are.
Yeah.
That makes the people are now saying, gosh, my leader, I'm looking up to them as a person. And, if times are tough, are they there? Are they there for all of us? Are they connecting with what I'm thinking? So I think, I'm sure it was, great leaders were multidimensional 100 years ago or whatever, of course. But even more so today when the work and COVID put the into it, right? The work life blur.
Yeah.
They're expecting your humanity. They want to bring their humanity. And quite frankly, life's more pleasant if you can bring some of your humanity to work. I'm not saying come to work and cry about what happened last night that was really difficult or something, but
Yeah. Well, and I think you mentioned in the book a lot too about back your thoughts off with research, which I think is important. And what does the research say about connectedness? I mean, it's the research does show that
yeah,
the more you can connect with people at that level, the higher performance and the better teammate you're going to have.
yeah, I don't know if you saw Gallup just put out their 2024 worker poll survey. They look 3.5 million people. It's pretty amazing. And they talked about a lot of that is, someone cared about me, dropped 10 points in the last couple of years, 40 to 30, a third of the people think someone at work cares. Encourage my development, less than a third of the people. So, people you and I both believe are looking for that. And right now it's a little bit wobbly, which I would argue just means you have a chance to be even a better leader if you're one of those, if you're one of the third that do help to grow your people, do care about them in the context of the work environment as, but as a person, not just a cog in the wheel.
Yeah, for sure. You brought up his name earlier, and Joaquin, is it Donato? Is that how you say his last name?
Duato.
Duato. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and in the book, you said his dad's advice to him was to see the person, not the role. And that's again, that's just the same thing that
Yeah.
getting at that human level with somebody, and not just dealing with someone who's a manager or a leader or a title,
Sure.
so to speak.
Yeah, right. Or, in my business, oh, that's just a second year consultant. No, it's actually Joe Smith, and he
Yeah,
happens to be a second.
yeah,
Well, I don't know, just since you raised him, it's interesting because he runs 100,000 person plus organization, and he works very hard to ensure his messages from way up there,
yeah,
connect with them. And he told me to the point about saying a person, he told me an interesting story on how does he work to connect more personally and deeply with his teams, even if it's just a video call. And he said one thing he does is he'll do two things. One, he'll ask people, a person underneath him he trusts, what are people saying I'm saying? And he said when he first took the job, he said, what are people saying about me? And the guy said, well, yeah, they're saying you want to cut costs. He said, well, I never said that. He said, I want to, drive simplicity and get and the complexity out of this place. And it's a highly matrixed org. Said, yeah, I know that's what you said, cut cost. Well, I can't, but he took the time to see a person and ask him what words are being heard, not just what am I pontificating from on high,
yeah,
which is not at all what he was intending to mean. Although, if you and I heard the word simplicity, we would assume cost reduction, right?
yeah,
That's what you think.
yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. It reminds me, I don't know if you read the book, but Phil Knight of Nike wrote a book some years. I think it was called Shoe Dog.
Yeah, yeah, I've
And
got it around here somewhere. I read it. I did read it.
and one of the things that I just really resonated with me is he says, my entire career, everyone tells me it's not personal, it's business. And he said, BS, it's always personal. And I thought, that's kind of the way I feel. You just can't make a decision and say, oh, it's not personal, or, don't get offended, it's not personal. I mean, you have to consider the personal, and I think the people that don't, bites him somewhere down the line.
Well, yeah, and that's an interesting example to use because he's also has a reputation of being a hard driver,
Yeah,
wants to really win and all that. But he's not saying it just comes from him being a jerk. It's actually from
yeah,
motivating the guy that was making those shoes in the basement of that movie, whatever the movie was,
yeah.
to make the best damn shoe. Now he pushed him hard, inspired him, but he wanted the guy to deliver the best and at his best.
Yeah, yeah. So you also mentioned in the book some what your kind of strategy during COVID. Your publisher said don't talk about COVID, but I'm going to talk
Oh
about
no,
COVID.
there was some COVID in there.
But one of the things I thought was interesting was your very intentional strategy of sending emails to people.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about what you were thinking there and what was that strategy?
Well, a couple thoughts. First off, in the business world now, and maybe it's now becoming a little passe, but email is the way you connected with a lot of people pretty darn quickly. That's number one. It's a very good tool. Number two, when we're all disconnected, we all recall, people were dying to have some sort of connection, just to feel and hear from their leaders. So I mean, I think the thing I referenced in there, I wrote a note. I woke up at 4:45. I mean, I thought about the teams a lot and the people a lot and what they were going through. And I woke up at 4:40, well, maybe it was 4 o'clock. I think I started thinking about, I want to send a note just letting them know I'm here, we're here for each other, what you're going through, trying to understand, etc., what all of us are going through. And so I wrote a note. I mean, it just kind of says, I don't care if you're there alone, with roommates, with the dogs, or with babies, or with all of the above, tripping over them. We're all in this together. And it was a rather personal note. I sat there and did for 45 minutes thinking about, do I send this? For all kind of like, they'll say, well, who is he, the senior guy, to know what we're thinking? Or, my colleagues will say, shoot, you're going to write a note like that. Do I have to write a light note like that? Or the fact that I sent it at 5 in the morning, they'll think, do I have to be up at work at 5 in the morning?
Yeah.
But after going through that, it wasn't very many words. I can't remember, 50 words or something. I hit send and literally at 5:15 East Coast time. So it wasn't like the West, within seconds, there were responses.
Hmm.
Other people were awake too. And just, like, hey, thank you for acknowledging how I'm feeling. Thanking you for just, trying to connect with us. It was,
Yeah.
it just showed to me that people really, and to expose a little bit of vulnerability, to be honest, people in those kind of times, I think all the times want to know, see a little bit of vulnerability, see some authenticity, I guess the better word to use,
Yeah.
and know you're thinking about them.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. You also talked about creating a sounding board. So, as a leader, tell us what a sounding board looks like.
Yeah, well, that was for me during COVID, I actually had, well, one on this machine here in front of me, 12 or 15 faces of
Yeah.
people at different levels with whom I don't normally speak. Obviously, there's 7,000 people, and just bouncing off whatever the current topics of the day were. But it was very important because my chief of staff came on too, and he said to me, Joe, you have to keep your mouth shut. Because it's very easy for the leader. Oh yeah, no, and here's what we're trying to do. And jump right in. And this isn't
Yeah.
the point. The point. So he would throw things out, and we'd say, I'd say a little bit, but not much. I really had to keep my mouth shut. And I don't know, there's silly things like buy everybody lunch, or do you need a monitor? Do we need home equipment, or just all kinds of stuff. That's what I did. I also say Joaquin does something similar. He has a sounding board. When he's going to give a talk, he'll bring together 7 or 8, 10 people, just similar to what he asked for that one man, and give him do the talk, and then listen to what I say. And he might use the word transformation, and they say change. And he'll say, oh, so my word doesn't resonate that, so he'll change his words to the word that resonates with the audience.
Hmm.
And then he'll also say, what did I say? Overall, like if you were at the dinner table tonight, what would you tell your family I said? And play it back. And if it wasn't what he meant to say, he'd go back to the drawing board and rewrite the speech.
Yeah.
So those are just two examples. One, whether it's ensuring you're communicating clearly, or whether you're just making sure you're slightly on track with what everybody else is thinking. Especially with in that situation, I was now very senior. There's 24-year-olds working with me.
Yeah.
Whom I don't know what a 24-year-old's going through.
I imagine you experienced that quite a bit from your editor too. When you, as you said, you wrote your own book, and when you write it, you probably, kind of latch onto it, fall in love with it, say this is perfect, and then the editor comes says, "Oh no, that you should be this way." That's got to be you got to be pretty humble to
Well,
take that, right?
yeah, well, fortunately for me, I was a consultant, and we're always, there we worked in PowerPoint, but we were always rewriting, editing, making each other's work stuff better. That's not good enough. No, no, this word's not. But I also had a friend of mine at BCG who was an editor for many years at a publishing firm, and he said, "Joe, I will warn you now, the editor's going to come back and change a bunch of stuff, and 95% of what they want to change is better than what you wrote." So, and because you wrote what you wanted to say, they're going to write what someone might want to read,
Yeah, yeah.
So, but funny story is the first time the editor sent back a sea of red, I just said, I accept. The editor said, you can't accept, you have to read it. I said, well, I told 95% of it's good. I'll take a chance on the 5%. She said, no, no, no. You go back and read what I wrote.
Oh, that's
So,
great.
but,
That's
but it,
great.
yes, it can be very humbling. Fortunately, I got advice to take it.
Well, I think I read once that I think it was John Grisham who said the secret to being a long-standing, sustainable author is listen to every word your editor says and don't fall in love with what you always write because as you just said, they're usually right. And, so listen to them and, be
Yeah, well,
open to other ideas.
they're trained to think about what the reader's reading, not the words you're saying. I mean, it's the
Yeah.
same thing as Joaquin asking, "What am I saying?" Oh, that's not what I
Yeah.
meant. Someone go fix it. He fixed it himself.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So you also you have a chapter in the book too that talks about, which is a word I love too, that curiosity is a real leadership trait that we all need. And so, again, just expand on that a little bit. When you say that, what are you talking about?
Yeah, well, that is where I'm, using. I think the second half of that is generous listening, but really this concept that I think is so critical, which is really about well, it's things you and I were talking about earlier, and we're talking about controversial topics, but taking the time to ask questions of others with a level of curiosity that you want to learn where they're coming from, what they're thinking, how they're thinking about it. Very importantly, take your own barriers down and think, what do they know that I don't know? And when I put the two together, how do I make it better? I used to say at work to my teams, I'd say, I want you guys to go out there, engage the skeptics, and uncover the no's. And they, well, these people they're just trying to be a pain. I said, no, maybe one out of 1,000 naysayers are just troublesome. The rest of them know something you don't know. And if you, as a consultant, if you're going to go recommend something and you're missing big pieces of what actually takes to get it done, well, the fact is you're going to fail as a consultant. Um,
Yeah,
so it's really asking questions, listening, and understanding. You, Steve, know something I don't know, and if we talked about it, we'd both be better off.
you know, it seems to me that people spend a lot of money and a lot of time with consultants, which, you spent your whole career doing that. So, but many of them don't always do what the consultant says. It's like, okay, we just spent all this money and all this time. How do you, did you experience that? Like sometimes you do all this great work and you say this is really going to work, and then the company or the leader doesn't follow through on it and doesn't do it, or did you have a pretty good track record that people seem to
Well,
follow
well,
what you're saying?
well, I mean, of course, there's times where people, for whatever reasons, either
Yeah,
don't always follow through. I think I got to think about it because I do think, well, consulting's changed. We don't talk too much about it, but nowadays consultants don't just let's do a 6-week study, write a PowerPoint deck, and drop it on the desk. That's what we did 30 years ago in strategy consulting. Now
yeah,
clients say, okay, we got to get it done. So, I think the difference now is they may say, okay, this is a good idea, and blah, blah, blah. But then can and will they fully execute it is the question.
yeah,
And
yeah,
there it could be the consultant's fault because they didn't uncover all the no's, so the plan's not as good as it should be. And or it just wasn't, and or it's the organization couldn't take it all on for many reasons. Rarely it's just like, oh, if we disagree, then they'll just fire you and move on. That's fine.
yeah,
But
yeah,
change is the harder part. Coming up with pretty damn good ideas. No offense to my colleagues who, strategy is important, but then getting it done is, what do they say? Executional strategy for lunch,
yeah,
every day of the week.
yeah, for sure. In the book, you also, at the end of each chapter, I like how you had your call to action section. So, It's nice because there's a lot of points that are brought up, but then it's like, okay, fine, sounds good, whatever. But then at the end of the chapters, it's okay, call to action. So this is what you can actually do to implement these things. And as you said, strategy is great, but implementation is the key to making things happen.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. No, it's, you can probably tell by this call, I'm a rather practical guy that likes to drive
Yeah.
outcomes. No, it's funny because my daughter read it. So, oh, Dad, I like this because it wasn't just theory about, what such and how Microsoft got great, but you actually give me some ideas on something to do, which I can go try them. And that's, which is what I wanted to do, and that's how I'm wired too.
Yeah. So, you talked earlier about, people feeling like they're being included and how important that is. And sometimes that means supporting them and bringing them along. Sometimes it's a little bit of a tough love. So tell us a little story about Susan. Is it Grimbilius? Is that her name?
Frivolous, yeah.
Grimbilius. Yeah, tell us that story.
Well, that's an interesting, yeah. So, I actually, well, the first thing I believe is, you want to have people around your table that are not just your team, or I won't use cronies, but your own sport. They're only going to tell you everything you want to know. You want to include broad set of people, different departments, different levels, whatever it might be. But then when they're in the room, you want to bring them in the room, right? And make sure they're participating, which is you as a lead. If they're someone junior, it's not Susan, I'll get to that, but they're going to be nervous. So it's on you to ask them a question or
Yeah.
two to bring out their insights. So Susan is the North America management team. She was at the table. She was, she'd been there for a while, and every time she didn't feel like she belonged at the table. Was the problem. Every time she spoke, she'd speak too fast, but not just, and bumble over herself and just diminish her. But I knew she was just nervous and didn't feel she belonged there. So one day, and I liked her a lot. We were good friends. I pulled her out of the room. I said, well, can I talk? I said, Susan, you are at this table. You deserve to be at this table. You earned the right to be at this table. So start acting like it. Ooh, she said, I felt like you punched me. And so, well, no. I said, well, and she goes, but I tell you, I reflected, I was upset at you at that moment. But you, of course, I was there. I did earn my right there. It wasn't a gratuitous event that I was in that room. She was a leader of the firm. And I, took into account what you said, tried to slow down, think about my places, etc. So it was, I'm a big believer. If you care about the person and you're coming from the right place, you understand what strengths they can leverage. It's really good to give in the moment feedback as best you can. And you don't want to be hurtful, but being direct and clear such that it makes them go, you can't see me, but my face is jerking. It was such that, they kind of, whoa, what did you tell me?
Yeah.
Then they're not, don't hurt them. I'm not saying don't hurt them, but if it comes from the right place, you can get away with a lot
Yeah.
and the person will, get better.
Well, and that goes back to that theory with you were able to do that because you had a lot of deposits into her before of, saying, good things. And so when you went for that withdrawal, let's say, she allowed you to do it because you had the history with her.
That, yeah. And she knew, she knew I cared about her
Yeah. Yeah.
development.
So you also talk about becoming an action ally. You mentioned that a little earlier. So what's an action ally?
Yeah, that was a new one even for me. And my team, someone called me. I said, you're an action ally. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, you actually don't just wear the button on Black Lives Matter month or Pride month or whatever it might be. You actually are trying, or you don't just drive metrics, performative ally color. You actually try to give, she said, in her case, give me opportunities to step into roles where, I deliver, I don't deliver. And that's a little, she said, that's unusual. So I talked to a lot of my friends of mine who, whether one was Latin and gay or black, or, you think about that type of allyship more. And it was very clear. They said, Joe, don't do for me, but open the door for me and then let me walk through. Now, when I do walk through, give me your best coaching like you would anybody. And the last thing is if at times get tough, don't run away. And it's interesting how many times I had friends tell me stories. And I'd say, well, people really ran away. And someone say, well, yeah, remember this and that. And I just thought, holy shit, yeah, that guy just abandoned you. And,
Yeah.
I didn't even process it, but they just felt. So that's what it is. Open the door, let them walk through. They will perform or not. They do not want you to do it. but give them the coaching. And if it's tough times where they need more coaching or help or support, you don't disappear just because it's inconvenient or you're
Yeah.
scared.
Well, and that's the highest level of leadership, what you just described there. That's sponsorship,
Yes.
and when you sponsor somebody, you're putting your reputation on the line. You're putting your, but you know that person, you've coached them, you've mentored them, so you feel they're ready. But when they need to be sponsored, you got to sponsor them.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that word, that's a big, bigger word because that means you are actually, you're
Yeah.
supposed to have their back. I mean, there's nothing, you've probably seen it too, more
Yeah.
disappointing than when you watch someone sponsor somebody and then they abandon them. It's like,
Yeah.
really? So don't be that kind of leader.
Well, since you've talked a lot about being vulnerable and authentic and all that, I'm gonna ask this tough question because you did bring it up in the book. So
Which one?
give me your what is the significance, when you look back on your childhood, and I think you were 8 years old, and it's 1965, and you're just a kid trying to enjoy life and whatever, and your mom tells you that you're not going back to live with your dad, and then later you found out that that was because your dad was gay, and
Yeah.
so in that day and time, that was probably a tough thing to deal with, and I'm just curious how you look at that and how that transformed your life or set yourself up for what you do now.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna have two parts to that. One, well, three, but one is I do believe moments like, I mean, it's just, I was 8 year old, parents separating, but I was pretty brutalized. I remember it. Those moments actually build resilience. It's so, I've been, maybe it was sad then, but I actually think it helped me out over time. Then on the whole vulnerability, I think, two other points related to that. My mom, I think I mentioned, my mom died when I was 30. Well, actually, it's a funny one first. When I got married at 23, I cried through my vows. I could not get through them. And I was so embarrassed, what 23-year-old guy in 1980 crying. Well, and she was clear as a bell. But I'll tell you, it's funny, Steve. Afterwards, all these people came up. Oh, the emotion in the room was so wonderful, and I could feel the love. And I didn't process that at that moment.
Yeah,
Oh, wow, I'm getting a message that showing myself is a good thing, even though I was embarrassed as hell. When my mom died, I was 30, and this time, my three brothers, we got up there to talk, and you can imagine, then I just sobbed, couldn't get a word.
yeah,
And but the priest said, "Well, tell you, Joe, don't worry about it, because tears are the fountains of love." And sure
yeah,
enough, all these people came up. Wow, the love in that room. So there was one message for me is that kind of vulnerability. Now, those were extreme moments, but it showed me, hey, it's okay to let your humanity out. I actually got a lot of positive feedback. I didn't get it. And as time went on, um, I felt it even more. Now to my dad, yeah, well, I mean, we could talk forever, but let's tell you, I don't know, probably took me 10 or 15 years to truly process and understand it. I mean, I would go down, I mean, I lived with a guy. I still didn't, my wife,
yeah,
I didn't know he's gay. I mean, I
yeah.
think I must have blocked it to your point, Steve,
Well, in the book, I think you were told that it was his roommate.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
No, it was his
yeah,
roommate. But
yeah,
since we're doing the time, but one time when I was married and my dad said, "Oh, we're going dancing," and he brings a woman, and then my wife and me. Well, we went to a gay San Francisco club down in South of Market in those days, and I didn't. It was all, and I still didn't process my dad was gay. Can you believe this? Can you believe?
yeah,
But then as to your point on, I mean, well, when he had AIDS pills or HIV pills on his, pantry in the kitchen or wherever they were in the bathroom. Then I processed it. But,
yeah,
a couple of things come with that, of course. And then I shared it with a big group of people at BCG after quite a time. I was the pride team. And I didn't want to say, like, I know your life, because I don't exactly, but I did want to say, I know a little bit of your life, and I at least can relate. But it did two things. Again, well, the resilience, the willingness to share some vulnerable moments and the positive reaction you get. And then probably this whole thing about allyship, later on when I process how my dad dealt with being in San Francisco right during the AIDS crisis and ultimately die of AIDS or AIDS related. Um, you just become a little bit more understanding of others, or you try to be, and not everybody's
yeah.
coming from the same place and has the same, situation. So there you go.
Well,
There's
Well,
three learnings from all that.
yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. I mean, that those are true life, messy situations that I think when we share with others, that they can hear that and say, "Oh gosh, I've got this and I've got that," and they can relate, even though it's not exact same, scenario. But yeah, vulnerability, and I also loved your story. Maybe that's why I loved your book so much because I'm a crier too, So I
Yeah.
I've got the tears in a few speeches in my day, and I'm just you said it exactly. You're so embarrassed and you're so upset with yourself, and then people come up and say, no, that's what made it. That's what thank you for doing that. So nobody likes to let you see somebody ugly crying or bawling out of control, sobbing, but
Oh, that's different. Yeah.
yeah, sometimes when you show some emotion, people can relate to that. So
Or even, you know, since you trigger that, even you make the mistake in how you handle it or you goof. Like one time I was
yeah,
speaking at a Black leadership conference, all Black CEOs and executives, and I had notes and I dropped the paper all over the floor. And at first, I leaned over and tried to fumble around and pick them up. Of course, I'm embarrassed as hell.
yeah,
Then finally, I just said, whatever, got up and just spoke from the heart. I kind of knew what I was going to say, spoke from the heart. Oh, I was so embarrassed. But at the event, that the gala that night, the dinner, four or five young people, 25 to 35, came and said, "Hey, man, to see you screw up like that and just get back up, the vulnerability, that was pretty cool." So here I was embarrassed, but it signaled to them, make a mistake, own it,
yeah,
move on. You earn respect.
yeah,
You don't earn disrespect.
yeah. That's so true. So, Joe, we've covered a lot of ground here today. What haven't I asked you that you want to make sure you get in the program?
Oh, well, I'm just thinking about it. We talked about, this whole idea of listening and understand where someone's coming from, which I think is critical, and vulnerability, which because I think you have to be humble enough to listen, right? If you believe you know all the answers, you're not going to show any vulnerability. You're not really a good listener. Those, I think, are two things that I just think are really, really critical, and I'm glad we talked about them.
Yeah,
One
yeah.
that said that, yeah, I mean, we could go on forever, but I just will reinforce those two because I'm glad we had a good chat about them.
Oh, for sure. So, Joe, at this point in the program, in the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question. And that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
In relation to, well, okay, maybe the simplest one is, it's your people and your team. They're going to drive your great success. So make sure you're spending your time thinking about how they're delivering, performing, growing, and you will enjoy the benefits of being a great leader.
Yeah, well said, well said. So, what's the age ranges of all those grandkids?
Well, I got 17, 15, and 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and zero's cooking. So
Wow, wow.
I got a
So,
lot of.
when do you get to spend a lot of time with them?
Well, yes. Oh, well, since I left, I retired from BCG on January 1st, and I always told my wife, actually, when I was 23, we got married then, we are going to go around and see our grandchildren in life. So I do get around to
Yeah.
seeing them, and we're lucky enough to get all together in the summer, together in Minnesota.
Oh, that's great. Well, that's fantastic. They just bring so much joy. I mean, a couple of grandparents here, talking about how great it is. Some people say, "Geez," but it's special, and I don't think you can describe it till you experience it. So,
Nope, you can't describe it. You
yeah,
can hear all those words. I heard them all too. I didn't get it until it was. I mean,
yeah,
I'll tell you one funny story. I worked all
sure,
the time, left, was on the road 4 days a week. I still love my kids, but I didn't stress about it. Now, when I don't be with my grandchildren, I go, well, I gotta be. I thought, wait, did I not like my kids? And I do like, what's going on here? But it's
yeah,
just different stages in life.
yeah,
It was very fast. I still haven't reconciled that one quite, but
yeah. That's
but they're
crazy.
pretty special. You're right.
Well, Joe, this has been a real pleasure. Like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed the book. You didn't pay me to say this, but it's a fantastic book. So if you want to read a great book, go get it. And I'm sure you can get it on Amazon or wherever. But yeah, I wish you the best of luck with the book and with your new retirement and all those grandkids. And just keep doing what you do because you've given great things to the world. And I appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And this was a lot of fun.
Okay,
Thanks for
take
your time.
care. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
Bye bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orangetheword.coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.